Welcome to the Rabble Hour. This is our second episode of the Rabble Hour, and we're excited. I'm Hassan.
And I'm Amr.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's episode 2. Well, it isn't hard to believe, but we're here on episode 2. It's exciting times. And we have another guest lined up for you on today's episode. But before we get into that, Amr, how are you doing? How's life?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you. Enjoying a little bit of drizzle that's going on this afternoon, but generally I'm good, thank you. How are you?
You know what? I'm okay as well. I'm okay. I don't have any summer blues, That's a good thing because we've had such incredible weather here in the Vancouver area for the last month, like sunshine and heat, which I love consistently. I love sunshine, I love heat. I cannot stand the cold. I shouldn't be living in Canada, but here I am. And Vancouver especially can be gloomy most of the year because it's always rain and overcast skies. But we've had an incredible summer, so one day of drizzle doesn't bother me one bit because we got a whole week of sunshine after this. I think it's after tomorrow. So life is good. Life is good. So yeah, we are here on episode 2, and we are going to be having a special guest, someone I've known for well over a decade. I think he and I used to work together about 15 years ago, and I haven't really kept in touch with him as often as I should have, but he's a fascinating person. He's Fahad Ali. He's the founder and director of Broomstick Creative, a digital media and content creation company that's based out of the Middle East in Dubai. And he's been based out of the Middle East now for at least a dozen or so years, or if not more than that. And he's was like me. He used to work in a company. We used to work together, and then he sort of went on his own way and started up his own business as an entrepreneur, and he's built it into something pretty incredible. He's got quite a big operation now with Broomstick Creative, and he's serving clients around the world. And so sort of augmenting our first episode, he's sort of an established professional that's been around now for a good number of years, and hopefully our listeners will get some inspiration and tidbits about digital media, some of the trends around technology, what's happening, what's emerging, some things to think about if you're starting out a new business, from both maybe a personal side as well as the technology side. So a lot of interesting things to cover in our interview today.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to listening to this guest. And he's operating in a space that I do, and on a much more smaller scale compared to him. But it's going to be absolutely great to sort of get his take on the creative field that he works in and the region where he's operating as well, and with a global footprint as well. So I'm really excited to listen to this interview.
Absolutely, and listeners, as always, basically we have we always welcome your feedback, your comments, your suggestions. If you have anything, please reach out to us. Our links are included on this podcast or in the description. Please, as always, we ask that if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. We would be very grateful if you did that. And as we start out here, we certainly think we're going to try and continue to keep bringing you some high quality interviews and content with people that will be of interest, we hope, to you. So with that, we will segue into our interview with Fahad. Our first guest today is Fahad Ali. He is the founder and director of Broomstick Creative, a digital media marketing company based out of Dubai. Fahad, how are you doing? Thanks for joining the Rabble Hour.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we're really excited having you. I've known you off and on for a good number of years now. And I know we used to work together a long, long time ago in the IT industry, and it seems like a lifetime ago, but it was well over almost like 15 years ago. And then you sort of, like myself, we parted paths after we left our employer, and then you sort of went on and went to the Middle East and have been based there for a long time now, and you started Broomstick Creative. So I'm just maybe you can tell our listeners a bit about your company first of all, and what made you originally want to start out in this space.
Sure. So one of the things I realized during our stint at the bank when we were working together was that content is pretty much the next horizon of where digital communication and marketing is going to be. Telcos, mobile phone technology, data transfer technology was evolving at such a fast pace. Even at our point in time, before I'd started the company, a lot of people were just facing challenges in terms of how to fill that bandwidth with great content. And there was a bit of a mad rush towards everyone just trying to get great content out there. Facebook was just struggling to get its pages populated. A lot of brands were trying to come onto the bandwagon. So I just thought, you know what? This seems like a plausible proposition if I were to get into it. It seems like on the near horizon, this thing might just explode. So it was pretty much just a bet I placed on my understanding of the technology in the sector, and then I just kind of hedged my bets against my experience in marketing, and then just started on Broomstick as at that point in time the region's very first digital content agency, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's quite something. And tell me a bit about the name Broomstick Creative. How did you come up with that?
Ah, that's a good one. So when we started the company, we were not one, we were around about five business partners, believe it or not. So we were all just sitting together at a cafe, and everyone was just coming up with names of what to call it. The usual path of coming up with really weird engineering ones and philosophical ones, and call it Six Sigma or Bullseye or the next horizon and yada yada yada. And then one of my ex-business partners just said, you know what? Let's just call it a broomstick. And then all of us started asking the question and answering at the same time to why broomstick. And then I then said, you know what? Let's do that, because one of the biggest challenges that we face as an icebreaker is actually having people coming up to us or asking us the first question. It's usually us trying to initiate the conversation. Having a name like Broomstick is a great icebreaker. And 9 out of 10 times, I have people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, is it a Harry Potter analogy? Does it have anything to do with wizardry and magic, or do you just come in and clean out the mess?" And I just say, I really don't have an answer. I just wanted you to be the first one coming up and talking to me, because scientifically proven, if you are the one breaking the ice and asking a question, you are more receptive to information coming your way as compared to someone else just cramming a sales pitch down your throat. So it's pretty simple. It's a weird reason, not a straightforward answer, but just
No,
based on
that's
human behavior. Yeah.
no, that's interesting. Actually, I didn't think about that. So you get the conversation going by people asking, "Wow, well, how did you come up with that name? And tell me a bit more about yourself." I see there's a psychological aspect to that I never thought of. That's
100%,
fascinating.
100%. That was just the pure science behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, fascinating, fascinating. Now, Broomstick Creative, you've been doing this for how long now? 15 years? You've had this company?
We're in our that's a good question. We are in our just doing a quick maths in my head, in our 13th year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
we're 13 years strong. Yeah.
It's not easy. Now, being a creative content, digital innovation kind of company, you're based in Dubai, but you have footprints all over the world, and particularly North America, the US, Asia Pacific, as well as South Asia. You're all over the world, and it's no small feat to actually have an agency with as the number of staff and people you do, and thrive for well over a decade now. So, this is a very, very broad area that you're sort of working in. And I often wonder, things in technology, you and I both know that it changes just rapidly from year to year or every couple of years now. There's always something new coming up or something new that people in the tech sector have to be aware of and see how that technology affects their business model often. So I'm wondering from your perspective, like how challenging is it nowadays to find new clients or audiences for the kind of work you do, given these changing mediums and channels of technology that you have to work with?
It is a challenge. I wouldn't shy away from saying that. I second guess anyone who's running an agency or any company in this services space, and then be one which transcends borders, and then they say, "Oh, it's pretty simple." It definitely is not. In our case, obviously, the biggest challenge is that because we're acquiring and working with clients in different markets, the economics change drastically from one region to the other. The cost of delivery, the revenue potential that the North American market promises us might not be at par with what the Middle East does. And so does the cost attached to it. So I might be having my costs much less for delivering a piece of work in one market as compared to the other. Um, then we also have to bear in mind the fact that sitting in the Middle East, sitting in Dubai primarily, which is right now it's just a buzzing market. Everyone's kind of coming down here. It's highly competitive. Then also future-proofing our services in terms of, at the end of the day, an agency is an agency. The only thing that differentiates you from the others is how you're applying and deploying your creativity, and also how you're bringing technology in the mix. So there's no straightforward answer. The only way, and the only, actually, to start off with, the challenges are manifold. And the only way to future-proof yourself is to, in our case, just think 2 to 3 years in advance, which is what we like doing. So from starting off as just a content agency back in 2012, as of today, we're morphing ourselves into a creative tech company rather than just a simple advertising agency. So my only advice to people out there working in different markets, working in the creative services industry, is just to keep your eyes and ears open and just try to plan at least a year or two in advance, and just keep an eye out on what the new technology is, because our industry is one of the very few industries where the adoption is so high that you can't sit around and wait for the market to catch up. That's pretty much it. If you do that, then you'll probably pretty much be, and you'll just end up playing catch up your whole life.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. That's certainly true. And it makes me wonder. I mean, like we've heard, and I've often heard in the last couple of years, at least, it's probably more than just a couple of years, but and I'm sure this is true. Correct me if I'm wrong. For a lot of your clients and people you work with, as well as a lot of businesses nowadays are focused on building, enhancing, and maintaining their brand. The brand that they have, and it's sort of, I've often seen it as your brand is sort of king for how you establish your presence, especially in the digital world online. Um, how important, like, what do companies need to be aware of when they're talking about their brand and building their brand, maintaining their brand? Uh, some of the environmental forces out there in the market that can sort of affect them, that they need to be on top of or aware of, as you say, maybe looking 1 or 2 or 3 years out.
So number one, I'll start with the basics. So whenever you're out there to build your brand in the first place, don't try to be overly creative. A lot of people tend to get carried away with the semantics, the visual side. You know, what is my logo going to be like? And you get so bogged down and involved in the extensions of building a brand that you really tend to take your eyes off the prize, which is what is the brand's essence, and that needs to be super super simple. Secondly, it needs to be super inclusive. You can't really think about launching a brand and not worry about it being represented across multiple geographies, as you said. So that's pretty much what I usually recommend. Now, in order to make sure that you're on top of things, and this is something that we've seen with a lot of our clients and even in our space. So we built Broomstick as a brand at the end of the day. People now know us by name. And the only idea behind that was consistent communication, keeping an eye out on the latest trends, as you rightly pointed out, but also being very, very focused in terms of what sort of message are we putting out there. So we never really presented ourselves in our case, and I can just take the liberty of talking about ourselves. And our positioning was very simple, straightforward, that we do not want to be an agency which is going to be huge and part of a big network. We always wanted to be a boutique independent agency which always paid a lot of attention and treated each brand, especially, with a bit more attentive treatment. So that was our shout. And all our communication, if you notice, all our client acquisition is centered around that. So we don't really want to work with brands who want to work with big network agencies because we would never be able to keep up with those guys. Plus, we will always know that the client will shift after a certain time period. So always make sure you have a very consistent piece of messaging going out. B, you're using all the mediums. I know people talk about it a lot, but it's very important to get your LinkedIn sorted out. Your socials are working nonstop, and you're being consistent with your messaging. If you keep on doing that, I do. Obviously, it's easier said than done, and this is a very blanket statement that I made. But I think if this is your starting point and your overall strategy, I don't think it should be a problem further on.
Yeah, and one of the things I often wonder about, further to what you're saying, is that the channels, the mediums or channels, if that's the right term, to get your brand out there are constantly evolving. I mean, it's Instagram, and then there's TikTok, and then there's always been Twitter, which is now X. I mean, all these sorts of different mediums evolve, and I'm sure in a year or two there'll be something else, the next big thing. I guess being on top of those channels and making sure you're there as well as part of it as well, right?
It does. See, every channel, every social channel out there delivers on a certain promise, and it delivers on a certain set of objectives for you. In our case, we know very well that if it's all about soft acquisition, our focus is on LinkedIn. But if we really want to get the message out there and for the brand to be built, we'll probably focus on our Meta and our Instagram tactics. Uh, we probably might not even be there at TikTok because we know TikTok gives great reach, but that's not a channel we want to be on. So I think it's a combination. Every channel delivers on a certain purpose and a certain promise, and it's very important for a brand to be aware of that. That's one. You can go with the carpet bomb approach. And the other thing that a brand needs to be aware of is that it's something that we call a conversion funnel. So you might end up having someone reach out to you because they saw your post on Instagram, but the next step for them would be to go check you out on LinkedIn at the same time. And the third step would be to check out your employees' profiles at the same time and see how do they feel about the company. You wouldn't trust your brand with an agency where you realize that the employees don't take ownership or the other way around. So,
Mm.
just to add to your point, yes, definitely multiple channels out there, but each channel has a different KPI or a promise. And it's important for you as a brand to A, understand that, and B, figure out how to work that certain channel would work best for you.
Yeah, and this sort of is a very good sort of dovetail into something related that I wanted to ask you about is you're getting your brand out there, you're sort of establishing awareness of who you are. Uh, I guess it's a form of reputation management, for lack of a better term. But once it's out there, and if you're a company or a startup or something, the other part of it that I've always thought is data and analytics, which has been something that's over the last decade that I've seen in my experience been huge for companies now, right? Sort of tracking data and doing analytics and having all that at their fingertips to make inferences off of. How big is that still? Is it evolving as much as we think it is? Is it still a major consideration for a lot of companies and startups, or is it something that's just it's ubiquitous and maybe even some people aren't using it to its full potential? What do you think?
So yeah, definitely it's paramount at the end of the day. It's really important. I find it hard to believe that in this day and age we'd probably find an entrepreneur or a business or a startup which isn't really as bothered about data as probably a startup would be from like decades back. Now, one of the challenges with data is that your touch points have increased because now everyone's walking around with mobile phones. They're checking in, checking out, making payments, doing bookings via apps, remote apps, web-based apps. So there's just so many data touch points that the biggest challenge we've seen with so many people we've been talking to, and obviously I've been interacting with people for the last decade or so, is they've got the data, they just don't know what to do with it. And it's that aspect of digesting that data and analyzing it and creating insights is something that not many people are able to do properly. To add another layer of complexity, uh, as we talked about the fact that you have AI come in, and then obviously the different social and digital channels are churning out their own set of data. In some cases, the data isn't really as transparent as you probably expect. So there's this increased pressure on a lot of online players to develop their own data lakes and data sets. So, so the biggest challenge right now in the data space is how do we bring it all together and extract useful insights out of it? Because the amount of data available now is just phenomenal. It is probably like, I don't even know, exponentially much larger than what we probably would have seen back in 2012 or even the 2010 for that matter.
Yeah, and I've often wondered about that. Sometimes there's too much data is just too much data, and you don't know what to do with it, right? You're really trying to. I mean, from my perspective, and I'm no means an expert on this, I've often thought collecting data for the purpose of analytics is to answer key questions you want, like you're posing, and that you want answered to, but you need to know what questions to ask. So I often wonder, is there a gap there between a startup, a company knowing what they're trying to track and then going about tracking it, or are they just being fed information or taking reports or getting statistics and just using that to then reposition themselves and perhaps operationally change or change their focus or something like that? Do you know what I mean? It's like does the
Mm.
data drive the decisions, or do the decisions drive the data needs, kind of thing?
So, so I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but might as well say it, right? So it all depends on the startups, right? Now, a majority of the startups in this space, and I wouldn't use the word a majority, but we know there's a sizable number of startups out there which are driven by VC backing and VC funding. Now, whenever you're working on that pitch deck, you've created your whole business model based on that data set and a data map that you've sold to your VCs and your backers. Now, no matter what sort of data you encounter during your daily operating life after you've gone live, the challenge would also always be that, oh my God, I've made a promise. I've done these projections. I've told my investors that I'll have X% of market share, X% of ROI, X% of conversions by the end of month 6, month 12, month 24. Then, it's very difficult for someone to go back and question themselves. So, but if you're a startup which is primarily not answerable to someone on the basis of any promises that they've made, then you tend to question data in real time. And thirdly, then there's startups like ours. Actually, we're not a startup anymore, but yeah, if I were to start an agency today, then I wouldn't be as bothered about consumer data than I would be about industrial data, because then I would just need to put um, a bearing or a direction for my company because I need to go out and acquire customers. So again, like I said, it all depends on the nature of the startup. where it is on its life in its life cycle. And third, if the entire premise of that startup has been based on a data set, then it becomes really difficult for them to start questioning their mere existence. It's pretty much like someone's you know invested in stock options or in a certain ETF, saying that this set of technology is just gonna go crazy and it's gonna grow exponentially, but the data presents itself after a few months that it's just gonna go obsolete. But because you raise funding for it, you'll keep on pushing it and peddling it just not to prove wrong. I see this happen on a day in, day out basis in daily life because I mentor a bunch of startups. So yeah, the way I look at data is it just applies to so many fronts, not just to sell your product and proposition, but also the mere existence of your company at times is just, swayed by the data coming out.
Yeah, yeah, it can certainly be a chicken and egg sort of scenario sometimes, right? Depending on where you are, I guess, with your own business and or your own endeavor kind of thing. Um, I want to actually segue then to something that's a little bit more new in terms of reality for all of us now, and that's AI. And we've all heard about AI, and commercially, the average person's heard of Chat GPT and everything that's come with
Yeah.
it, and the so-called AI revolution. I guess I'll start by asking you, how has this emergence of AI, which I suppose if we look back even about 5, 6 years ago, we knew this was inevitable at some point. It was going to come mainstream and it was going to be utilized by companies in some way, shape, or form, either suddenly or gradually over time. How is this sort of affecting the work you do and in the space you're in right now? What sort of things are you watching for, and how do you utilize it, if at all, so far?
So I get asked this question a lot. So first things first, AI is the darling of businesses, innovators, investment investors, VCs out there. Everyone's just dying to get onto the bandwagon, right? Whether people want to invest in the company, which is using AI, people want to invest in stocks in anything remotely related to AI. And then businesses are under a lot of pressure, a lot of peer pressure. Oh my God, XYZ, my competitor is doing something related to AI. I need to build that into my proposition. Uh, Us as an agency, we've been obviously been dabbling around with AI for the last 4 years. We started using AI initially just to streamline our internal processes at a point in time where Gen AI was pretty much um, in its infancy stage. One thing, and I'm pretty sure people need to realize is that AI just gets better with time because it's just accumulating a lot more data. When it became sort of mainstream a year or 2 year back, actually probably a year and a half back, that's when it actually started to become really receptive by our clients. So as an agency, we're using Gen AI to create a lot of our visual boards. Earlier, we used to sketch our storyboards whenever we were trying to sell a concept. We're using Gen AI to create good copy. We're using Gen AI for concepts. We're using Gen AI for us to create, for actually coming up with all the creatives we're putting out on social media. So it's really helped us drastically. However, just by virtue of the process efficiency it's introduced within our work processes, it's actually even put more pressure on the team and us now because now we're running against time to create more and more output as compared to how things were 2 years back.
Yeah, and one of the things about AI that people find exciting and some might find even scary is that it's continuously learning, right? It learns by what you input into it and what you ask of it.
That's
So
true.
I would assume that it's fair to say, tell me if you agree, that in another 2 years from now, 3 years from now, its capacity, its capability, I should say, is probably going to be a lot. I mean, it's it'll multiply. It's exponential in a sense, right? Over time in terms of the capabilities it has. So oftentimes I talk to people that say, oh, this is going to put a lot of companies, industries out of work altogether. And I say, I don't think it's going to be that drastic, that fast. but it will certainly augment, I think, the work cycle that a lot of people have in many different kinds of industries. But it's really how you use it, right, to augment your work processes. Um, and I think that's why there's a lot of opportunity there as well. It can't by itself do everything a human does, but it
Mm,
certainly can augment our capacity as people and the bandwidth we have and the time constraints we have to help us get
sure.
things turning around. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And one thing that, so this is one thing that I try to tell people. The beauty, and that's why AI has emerged as one of the most popular technology and innovations that we've seen pretty much within our lifetime, apart obviously from the mobile phone and all that followed after it. See, every time there's a new technology or a new innovation that's introduced to the consumer, it's actually gone through years and years of access and evolution and being made available to a limited audience. The internet started off as a defense project, and now here we are. GSM, mobile phone technology, GPS, Kevlar, nanotech, all of these started off with very limited targeted applications and then trickled down to the masses. So that's a pretty much what I call a straight pyramid. Now, here comes AI, and I call it the inverted pyramid model, where OpenAI, now AI has been around for a while. IBM has been struggling with its Watson program and trying to make it mainstream for years. They've been talking AI for years, and all they could do was come up with a supercomputer that just challenged a test chess player. That was AI for them, right? Whatever the B2B applications were to the common man on the street, they probably would never know. However, the beauty with ChatGPT and everything else that comes with it, by making it open source and just putting it out there to the common man, they just actually increase its capability to be applied to daily life. That's why we're actually having these conversations today as to how are you changing your the way your company works, or how are kids doing their assignments, or why are artists going out and going on strike because of Gen AI using their lookalikes, because it's just available to the mass audience. And that's the beauty about AI. I see it evolving, I see it growing, I see it going from strength to strength, primarily just by the virtue of the inverted pyramid. It was made available to masses much earlier than all the technologies you've seen in the past. And now you see it being trickled down to really targeted applications, like an AI engine, which is only going to do 10-second videos, or an AI engine, which is only going to do realtor related data models, or an AI engine, which is primarily only going to focus on getting your performance marketing campaigns to work better. Now, these are really, targeted applications, but it all starts off with a mass audience and a mass adoption.
Yeah, and then it sort of takes a life on of itself, right? It just goes from there and becomes something we may not expect it to become. So yeah, no, that's definitely true. I just wanted to quickly shift gears here, Fahad, to ask you something about I personally, in my line of work, I'm interested in human factors, right? The human sort of experience of all these things. So branding and work, and how it variates between people, and how people are receptive to sort of managing these things we've been talking about, like their image, their brand, their reputation, leveraging technology, etc. I guess since you're a company, Broomstick Creatives, based and serving clients all around the world, how do you find, in fact, any of the demands or needs your clients are asking of you differ by the geography they're in? I mean, I would assume that certain, I mean, for example, is brand management, reputation management more key to North American clients as perhaps it is to those in the Middle East or South Asia or Asia Pacific? Do you find sort of an emphasis on the kind of work that you're engaged for differ by geography?
100%. The end results are pretty much okay. Let me just rephrase the expectations of the end result are pretty much the same across the globe. Everyone's looking for ROI. Everyone's looking
Right.
for a certain set of deliverables. It's just the approach to execution which varies drastically from one geography to the other. A certain part of the world is a bit more demanding in terms of account management because it's very culturally driven as compared to another side of the world where they literally just do not want to talk to our teams. While
Mhm.
there's a certain, geography which believes in negotiating on prices, while another geography is pretty straightforward with us upfront and says, oh, this is our budget. What can you deliver within this amount? So the cultural nuances are the ones which are really coming into play for us whenever we move between 4 to 5 time zones, if that's one analogy of putting it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's something and the only way for us to kind of wade and maneuver through that is make sure we have people on the team who can understand and relate to these cultural nuances. See, and one thing you got to keep in mind is my company is 13 years old now. I'm not a startup which probably started in 2019 or during COVID, got a bit of injection of funding or whatever, and then is at a certain stage right now, which has not seen a financial trough, if not a crest. And I've worked through two of these till now. And one thing I realized is that as a company, if you are expanding into different geographical markets, you also need to keep on evolving your operating model every now and then. We all keep on complaining, not complaining, but talking about inflation over the last 4 or 5 years. Everyone's been talking about interest rates going up over the last 12 to 13 months and how governments around the world are trying to, put the brakes onto inflation. But on account of this inflation, operating costs have gone up for so many companies. Now, how do I, as a company which is working in different markets, manage that? Then I'm just moving my pieces of machinery around and seeing if I can put a lot more resources in an offshore low cost center. And then perhaps when things change, move them back into onshore. So these are things one needs to maneuver around as well. So in addition to understanding different requirements for clients, also keep an eye out on how things are internally and make sure your business maneuvers around that too.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like that old adage, I'm sure you probably remember, Fahad, know your customer,
True.
certainly applies, but it's also know your environment, and know the environment you're operating in, as well as knowing your customer. So, sort of a macro and a micro view into who you're serving and who you plan to serve, regardless of it, if it's a type of a specific culture or a specific geography, the operating environment, the economy, all these things are intertwined. So being aware of that is certainly, I guess, having a sense of the situation of the world is always critical, especially in the early years, where, as you say, you've been around well over a decade, but a newer venture starting up, for example, during COVID or since COVID, may not have that runway, right? They don't have that experience to know that, or maybe the cushioning, or injection of capital to sustain themselves without, devoting some time into the research into these things, being aware of them, certainly before they move forward. Yeah,
100%. 100%.
yeah,
I
absolutely,
agree.
absolutely. Amr, tell me, you got anything here to chime in on, to ask Fahad?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been listening with great fascination. Um, One of the things, Fahad, I'd love to ask is being over 10 years in this space, how have you seen the challenges evolve and opportunities evolve? And what do you know now that you didn't know 10 years ago?
Well, oh, that's a tough one. Right. So, which one do you want me to tackle first?
I'll let you play as you wish.
All right. So, okay. So, what do I know now is so. To
I
be
guess,
honest, yeah.
sorry, I'll cut in a little bit. I guess what one of the things that I'm trying to ask is, I'm sure you had a certain idea, certain perception, certain expectations of what you were getting into, and obviously excitement as well. And over a decade into this now, I'm just curious to know, what it is that you thought you were getting into, and what it is that you are into now, if that makes sense.
Okay, got it. So one thing's for sure, when I was starting off the company, obviously back in 2012, I had no idea, and I definitely did not have any plans of expanding the business westwards, to be honest. So I'm originally from Pakistan, right? So one of my strengths was knowing the fact that I understand the South Asian market. I've been in the Middle East long enough. I've had this exposure working with companies in the UK and the US and, on and off in Canada. I never really wanted to even consider expanding into Europe and North America at that point in time. And that was something that wasn't even part of the plan. The other thing that I never even thought I'd be looking into was adding more business lines. Because when I started off the company, I was absolutely so sure that I will just be an agency operating in this niche, trying to target a certain segment. A proposition that really works well for companies in Europe and North America, I've realized, but doesn't really work well in the Middle East and South Asia. So you got to be really good at taking on multitude of clients and different sectors. And I never really thought that would happen. All of this kind of happened by design, by destiny, by chance. I don't really know. It just happened so fast. But that was never the plan, to expand and to get into different sectors and even to add further verticals in the company.
Right. That's absolutely fascinating. One of the other things I'd love to follow up is, because this is something that I find out, because I also kind of run my own little boutique studio. How do you find the mindset in terms of the creative process, in terms of the region where you are, and in terms of other geographical areas and people that you deal with? Do you find it to be a little bit of a constant battle, or do you find that once you have an idea and you're kind of presenting it to your clients, that more or less you find them to take it on with ease?
So we found our clients in the Middle East to be a bit more risk taking, if that's the phrase I'd like to use. Primarily because again, it's a natural byproduct of the economic scenario. So right now, obviously, access to capital, growth wise, hustle and bustle wise, and even just by sheer virtue of perception and visuals, the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are happening markets. So everyone who's either working here or coming here to do business has a bit more appetite for risk. That's just by virtue of the way the region works. Having said that, our clients in other parts of the world are fairly risk averse, I'd like to say. We've noticed that they're more frugal with their budgets as compared to the ones over here. I'm not saying by any chance that I make more money in the Middle East than I do in North America or the other way around. It's just that the expectations of spending money are just a bit more control in terms of how every penny is spent in other parts of the world as compared to the Middle East, where we found that clients are a bit more creatively risk taking.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's really good to know. Yeah, I think it sort of more or less kind of fits into exactly what I would have thought. That you would have a little bit more sort of reserve approach out in the West compared to the Middle East, which is really interesting to know. And in terms of like content, so storytelling is the heart of content creation. How do you keep yourself fresh in terms of ideas? What is your sort of internal process? What is your own process? How do you keep yourself kind of inspired, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
So it's hours and hours of doom scrolling on TikTok and Instagram. And pretty much hours and hours of dedicating your life to any OTT platform out there without taking a name. So no, so yeah, we just so the way it works is I personally obviously I'm a big fan of movies, cinema, TV. I've been part and part. I started my career with MTV in Pakistan. I actually was part of the launching team. So I've always been infatuated with TV and content for that matter. So I myself am, yeah, I just, how should I put it? I just devour anything that comes down that path. So that's pretty much it. So it's pretty much staying attuned to what people are watching, spending a lot of time on TikTok, looking for trends, also going out and meeting people. So in my specific case, I look after the strategy side of the business, whilst I might be able to consume the execution side by watching, say, tuning into Netflix or watching a series on Disney or, browsing TikTok and Instagram. But the biggest challenge is what sort of a strategy you need to come up with to get a consumer to watch it. And I feel the best way to do that is to go out and meet and talk to people. So I like to, weekends, I do walk around the malls. Malls are big here in the Middle East. So it's a big thing and just walk around, see what people are doing, what are their patterns, what do they like eating, where do they want to just sit down and have coffee, what are the kids pointing to when they're walking past the shop displays. That's something I just like doing. People watching, if you might want to call it, that just keeps my mind fresh because at the end, I just long for that human connection, which we all are losing by virtue of the devices we're hooked onto day in, day out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah. Well, as you say that, Fahad, going out and meeting people, who would have thought that's still fashionable in the year
Yeah.
2024, right? I mean, like going out and talking to people in a mall or out on the street, and having a conversation and chatting it up and developing a connection and getting inspired that way. I mean, it seems like a novel concept right now, but I'm not gonna date myself in terms of age. But I remember a time when people actually used to do that, as part of just everyday routine. So who
Funny
knew?
enough, so one thing I really liked about uh Toronto, because I spent a lot of time over there lately, and I was in Houston last year as well, actually earlier this year. I've noticed people are generally a lot more, again, it'll depend on what part of town you're in and who you're talking to, but people are generally more open talking to strangers and opening up than I've seen here in the Middle East. So we're here, it's just this frenzy, which you probably find in New York as well. We don't. I found people in Canada, Toronto, very very friendly, and just you can just go up to a stranger and just have a casual conversation about the weather, which you probably wouldn't do over here.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not so sure. I think here, even in the big cities, people have people live in their sort of, not everyone certainly, but there is a reputation of the big cities and Canada, especially. I mean, in Vancouver here, that it's hard to get into conversations with strangers, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, no, I mean, if you can make an effort to do that, it goes a long way. So listeners out there, if you're working or if you're just, trying to build something, no matter what it is, a hobby, a business, something, go out and engage people in person if possible, and you'll be surprised how far you can go sometimes. And it sort of has a snowball effect in sort of getting yourself in a good comfort zone and getting inspired, as Fahad says, in no matter what it is you're doing. So absolutely, absolutely. So Fahad, we only got a minute or two here left. So maybe tell our listeners how they can reach you and the best ways to sort of follow you.
Sure, sure. So our website's broomstickcreative.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as Fahad Ali. That's the best way to get hold of me. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out. Anything that can be that I can be of any assistance to your listeners, always happy to help Hassan and Amr. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Fahad, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today, and we really appreciate it.
No, thank you, thank you. This was great, great conversation. Thank you for taking my brains and giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fahad.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, that was a very, very insightful and interesting conversation with Fahad Ali, director of Broomstick Creative. I really found that to be quite interesting from both the perspective of he's obviously got a lot of technical knowledge and awareness, situational awareness of his environment and the environment he operates in, but also, holistically factoring in, the business environments, the economy, and all sorts of other things, and how that plays a role in adjusting to the expectations of his customers and clients, especially given that he has a global reach. What do you think, Amr?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the interview. Great, hearing from him and learning how he's evolved over the years and how he's built his company and the footprint that he has today. It was really a great listen. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I when I speak to people like Fahad who are entrepreneurs, who are have an interest and basically they pursue sort of a dream, if you want, and try and make something of it. You can sense a lot of passion and interest in the way he describes things and sort of responding to the questions we had for him. I think that goes a long way, but I think there's a lot of there's something to be said about just sometimes trying things out, and he's been doing this for well over a decade, so he's pretty established now, but trying things out. And I guess if you're a young person or an entrepreneur thinking about starting something up, if you have an idea, it's worth sort of doing your research, understanding the environment you want to sort of enter, doing your research, talking to people, getting insights. That really goes a long way. And then sometimes it just involves, if you have the ability, then you're just taking a chance and trying it out. So, it's always inspiring to hear that kind of story. And I know he's done quite well with Broomstick Creative. And I'd encourage all our listeners to check out his website, broomstickcreative.com, and follow him on social media, LinkedIn, and other places. We'll include links to his bio and all the relevant links in the description. But yeah, no, it's really insightful to hear that. So just on a separate note here, as we sort of wrap up, I was going to tell our audience that in upcoming episodes, we're obviously going to be lining up some additional guests for you to talk about all sorts of different things. We are a open-ended topical podcast on business and politics and the economy, cultural issues, all sorts of things that affect not just Canadians but North Americans. But we're lining that up for you. But we are the rabble hour, so that means we are a little disjointed, and we are going to rabble. Amr and I are going to rabble from time to time and get into topics I think that interest us, that maybe grind us in the wrong ways, or things that we have an itch that we want to scratch and talk about it through. And obviously, Amr, you have some topics and I have some topics. We'll definitely bring those up in these upcoming episodes. So get your laundry list of topics out and get ready to talk about them. All right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's once you kind of open this Pandora's box, there's just so much there that you want to know about, and people you want to talk to. So absolutely, I completely agree.
I'm not sure I'd call it a Pandora's box for me. I think it's more like one of those, what do you call those Russian dolls that, there's one doll inside the other doll and another doll,
Oh,
those
okay.
nested dolls. It's for me,
Yeah,
it's more
okay.
like that. I look at it the other way around. So
Okay.
you peel the layers on the onion and basically, you just you have more to talk about. So
Sure.
that's the way I sort of take it. But no,
Sure.
we definitely have a lot of stuff lined up in upcoming episodes. I say to all of our listeners, of course, please subscribe to this podcast, to our show. Through whatever medium you use to watch us or reach us, please subscribe to us. And of course, we have links to our feedback. You can always reach us anytime. We'd love to hear your feedback or any suggestions you might have for topics to cover. Yeah, I think with that, we'll wrap up another episode here. And unless Amr, you got anything else you want to add?
No, it's great to be on our second podcast here, and I think it went really well. Really enjoyed it.
Second
And,
episode.
Yeah, absolutely, our second episode. And I've really been pleased with the two guests we've had so far. It's been great, learning of them and learning from them. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really excited for what lies ahead for the Rabble Hour. Really.
Absolutely. And with that, folks, as always, follow us, like us, subscribe to us, and share this content with your friends. If you found anything here of use to you or of insight that you want to share to others, by all means do so. And until next time, we will see you next time on the Rabble Hour. Take care.
See you then.